Okay, I don't usually do this, but I feel like I have to. Usually, when I see other people send me videos of coaches or physical therapists promoting and talking about running mechanics, I usually just bite my tongue. But I can't this time. This video was sent to me, and it goes against everything that we talk about here. And it's riddled with misinformation, contradictions, and I want to break this down and respectfully dismantle it. So let's let it play. We'll talk about what his main point is and what my main rebuttal and my stance is.
By not lifting my feet so much, but keep them close to the ground, I save a lot of energy.
So what he's saying is that keeping your feet closer to the ground does not save energy. He is a proponent, and we'll see, of picking the feet up off of the ground and up higher and not keeping your feet closer to ground. So there's a lot of different nuances that we're going to go down. But first, I want to show the way that he is actually promoting and saying keeping your feet close to the ground is not how you're supposed to do it. Yes, the feet are staying close to the ground, but he's using a completely different strategy, using more of his knees. So what you notice is first, he's very upright. He's not leaning forward. And as a result of being upright, his weight's back, his center of mass is back, and therefore he's going to be landing and loading in front of his body and braking and slowing down. The other is he's still bounding. He's still going up and down. His feet are staying close to the ground, but he's more skimming. He's shortening up his stride so much and bringing his legs forward, focusing on the bringing the legs forward, pulling the legs forward with the hip flexors and the quads, then actually how we move forward, putting the foot on the ground, pushing the ground backwards to move forward. So he's keeping his feet close to the ground, but he's not using a hip extensor, push with a tush strategy, and just having his weight back and pulling the legs forward. If he had that appropriate lean forward, hinging at the ankles, then it's a lot harder to pull your legs forward because your weight's in an appropriate spot. But when your weight's back, you're able to more pull your legs out in front, overstride and break. So first things first, the way that he's keeping his feet close to the ground that he's saying isn't efficient isn't how you're supposed to do it. Let's go back to the tried and true analogy of how we move forward in a canoe. Canoe is like our body. The paddle is like the leg. How we move forward is we put the paddle in the water and we push the water backwards. Every action, equal and opposite reaction. The boat, my body goes forward. So what he is saying and going to be promoting is that not really even focusing on the pushing back, but then taking the paddle and picking the paddle up out of the water every single time is like picking your foot up off of the water, off the ground every single time. And so the way that he's actually promoting of picking the feet up, what you'll notice is he's bounding. How do I define bounding? You take the runner's head, find the frame by frame, where their head is at the highest point, highest off the ground. At that point, if the back toe is off of the ground, what that tells me is they're jumping. They're going higher than their body height. Where ideally, when they're at their highest point, the back toe is still grounded. So then when they leave the ground, they're moving purely horizontal and down, not up and then down. That's super key. Gliding is two parts. The lean, maximizing momentum, and the propulsion, pushing the ground back to move forward and down as we shock absorb, but it's not leaving the ground and going up and forward and bounding. So here's an example where I'm keeping my feet closer to the ground and running at a faster pace versus where he's promoting more of the kick forward, the pull forward strategy. So here's where we can actually see when he goes to leave the ground, peak height, highest point, look at how much higher he is than that line versus where I'm not going up quite as high and moving at a faster pace. That's bounding. The second part is braking. Ideally, when we land in low, when the foot is first flat, initial foot flat, the torso and the tibia are both parallel and tilted forward. That's going to maximize forward momentum and minimize braking. So far what he's saying and promoting is he hasn't talked about it much yet, but picking the feet up off the ground, pulling the feet up. And the way that he's promoting to do it, he's bounding and braking, so he's wasting energy. And the way that he's saying you shouldn't isn't even what we're promoting of keeping the feet close to the ground. But let's go into a little bit more about what he has to say.
Yes, I get it. It makes so much sense. It must obviously cost more energy to lift your feet and knees more when you run than do it less. Just like it takes more energy for me to lift my arm like this compared to not lifting the arm. If I don't lift my arm, no energy is used at all. Seems much better than wasting muscle power on a lift, right?
So this is crazy to me. Yes, he's right. And you'll see his reasoning why later. It's crazy. But yes, it is cost more energy for me to lift my arm up than to not lift it up. And one of the key points you're going to keep hearing me go back to of the main reason why it dismantles and discredits everything that he's saying is because of gravity. Gravity doesn't change. It's independent. It's pulling us down. It's this downward arrow. I have to fight that to bring my arm up. Gravity, if I let my arm relax when it's up, it will go down. When my arm's down at my side, gravity's still pulling it down, I can relax my arm. But to say that it is somehow he's going to make a case for lifting the arm up is less energy.
This is a common mistake when talking about running technique. You compare how it works when you're standing still with what happens when you're in motion, like when you're running.
So again, another common misconception. Yes, there's a difference between when I'm standing still and when I'm walking or running forward, but gravity still stays the same. But now we're having this forward momentum, but it doesn't change gravity being down. If anything, there's going to be some assistance in going forward, but not up. Take a look.
Let's start by looking at how the law of physics work. A long pendulum or lever costs more energy to move than a shorter pendulum or a lever. This works much like an old-fashioned metronome. When the weight is placed at the top, you get a long pendulum that moves slowly. And when you move the weight down to make the pendulum shorter, it goes faster. This is very clear also in figure skating. If you hold your arms out from your body when you do a pirouette and spin and turn around, it goes slow. Whereas the pirouette is quite fast when you bring your hands and arms closer to your center of mass.
So yeah, no disagreement here. It's true. The physics is true, but his application of this concept when it comes to running is going to be more nuanced than this, and it's highly dependent on your speed. More on that later.
If the foot comes up a little bit more, the foot moves closer to your center of mass, which makes it easier and costs less energy than if the foot moves closer to the ground.
So a couple things with this. One, the leg shouldn't move like a pendulum in the fact that it shouldn't be equal parts the leg moving forward and moving back. Think back to the analogy of the paddle in the water with the canoe. If I push the paddle backwards in the water, and then when I bring that paddle out of the water, if I bring it forward with as much speed, as much intensity and force, that's where we tend to overstride and land too far out in front of us. The other thing to think about is when he bends the knee to lift the foot up off the ground, even though the knee isn't moving, just holding in that position, fighting gravity, the muscle's on. Versus letting the leg relax, gravity do its thing, we're not fighting that. To bend the knee and to keep the foot up cost energy. The other thing I want you to notice is the difference of when his knee is bent versus when his leg is straight. And again, he's promoting bringing the weight closer to the center of mass, helping to reduce the mass moment of inertia. So basically watch, his leg, his thigh, doesn't even go behind him. That's like the analogy in with the paddle. I'm not even pushing the water back at all. I'm just having the paddle in the water and just focusing on that forward part. How fast do you think we'd go if we kept the paddle out of the water and we're just driving it forward in the air, trying to get momentum? We don't get a lot of power from that. Versus when the leg's straight, he's now actually able to go into some of the extension, pushing the water back, the legs going back behind. That's where we're getting that forward propulsion from. The other thing to think about is when we bend the knee, more of the weight, the foot, ankle, shin bone, is behind the center of mass. And so when it's back further, it requires more work of the hip flexors to bring it forward. Yes, the moment arm is shorter, but because more weight is being transferred behind, the hip flexors do have to work harder to overcome that. So the big keys with this is it shouldn't be equal parts pendulum forward and back. We don't want to overstride. He's not even getting into hip extension when he's having the knee bent like that.
And there are actually several other things that makes a slightly higher foot contribute to your running costs less energy, such as a mechanical push of the tibia that will contribute to a better knee drive and a better utilization of the rubber band effect you get from the stretch shortening cycle.
Okay, so I'm so glad he brought this up. This is such a common misconception about muscle elasticity. And yes, it is. It's a true thing. But where we're getting it, where he's talking about, by bending the knee, using the hamstrings, the quadriceps are passively being lengthened. And as a result, when the release happens, where is it creating that elastic recoil? Well, it's bringing the lower leg forward. And that's what we don't want. We don't want to continue to have the leg go forward and overstride or break. It's all about that tibial angle landing closer to underneath your center of mass. If that's helping to drive that lower leg forward, then we actually have to work harder to slow it down. Where the elasticity should occur is at the hip. Again, running ideally is hip driven, not knee driven when it comes to how we propel forward. So the hip flexors in the front of our thigh, when we push back into hip extension, pushing the ground back, when we release, the hip flexors can help to bring the leg forward more at the femur or the upper leg. That can be some of the assistance in bringing the leg forward. That's free energy. We don't have to use the muscles actively where we contract and they shorten as much when that elastic recoil is bringing the leg forward.
Now, you might think that lifting your feet and knees still costs more energy than what you save through the shorter levers, the movements closer to the center of mass, and the mechanical assistance and all the rest. But it's not at all about actively lifting your feet and knees. Instead, it's all about relaxation and letting the foot kind of just dangle up. You relax it and it will swing up.
So this is the biggest contradiction. I agree. The leg shouldn't be pulled up. He's saying the leg shouldn't actively be pulled up. But what he's saying is that when you relax, that it automatically, the leg goes up. Gravity. Remember, when we relax, the muscles are relaxed, the leg drops down. So imagine this. I'm walking forward, arms are swinging forward and back, and I just kind of relax my elbows and I let the arm go straight. What's going to happen? The arm's going to swing. We have some forward momentum that occurs. It's going to go forward and back, but what it's not going to do when you relax a muscle is go up. This defies the laws of physics. Down. Gravity is pulling down. You don't relax a muscle and suddenly it just dangles or swings up. It can go forward, but it doesn't go up. So by him saying throughout this that by relaxing the leg, that's what brings the foot up higher, is just, it's false. It's incorrect. And that can be dangerous if he's saying one thing, but doing something different. That's where we get some of this confusion. By relaxing the muscles, it does not bring the feet up.
It's all about relaxation. Do I have any proof that it works like this? Yes, of course I do. With my 3D cameras, I can measure how much energy it takes to move your body parts when you run. Note that I'm now talking not at all about moving the body up and down, but only the energy it takes to move the arms and the legs in relation to your center of mass.
Okay, so right now, me moving, can you tell how much energy that I'm exerting? This is two-dimensional. You're seeing two dimensions. Three-dimensional is adding another view, three dimensions. With just vision only, can you tell how much energy is exerted? So watch now is what he explains, and I could be wrong about this. He doesn't share as much of what he actually has in his lab, but if it's just 3D cameras, we can't measure energy. Energy is usually measured in the form of heat expenditure, or with force plates, and we can then infer energy expenditure from that. So take that with a grain of salt when he runs the experiment of this is just 3D cameras and it's measuring something, but is it actually measuring energy expenditure?
I just did two tests. One, where I did not lift my feet and knees so much, but I just let my feet move quite close to the ground on the way forward and backwards. And one, when I did the relaxation thing. Note the relaxation that makes my feet swing up by themselves. And now I put these two tests together. The darker, thinner lines is, as you can see, when I ran with my feet close to the ground, while the thicker, lighter lines is when I relaxed and let my foot swing up. Looking at these two figures, it's easy to think that it costs more energy to move the body parts more. That is the thicker, lighter lines where I bring my foot up. Then we look at the bars that show how much energy was used to move my body parts. The light colored bars to the left is showing when I let my feet come up. And that bar is lower than the darker bar on the right, which is where I had my feet close to the ground.
Okay, I don't understand this. Again, there's not really labels. It just says body segments and it's just bars. What is it measuring? What are the units? Is it a unit of energy? Is it just range of motion? Is it movement? Is it speed? What is it? The other thing is look at the difference. Yes, the peak of when he's saying he's keeping the feet close to the ground, it does go higher, but it's for a shorter duration versus when he relaxes and dangles and the legs go up. That's where it's using less. But is it less total? Is it total or is it the amount? If I put the one bar over the other, and kind of think of this like a glass of water, how much it's full. Think about total cumulative, how much effort, if that's even what we're measuring, is.
So the feet close to the ground costs more energy.
It costs more energy. Is it higher or more? Is it a higher amount of energy or is it more total?
This is a measurable fact. But what about my cadence?
Yes, if this wasn't confusing enough, let's add another layer of complexity and talk about cadence, the frequency of steps, how quickly your legs are moving. Cadence is a measurement. It's a measurement of how many steps per minute. It is extremely dependent on your speed. When you're walking forward, occurs anywhere between 3.5 to 4.5 miles per hour. Typically, the step rate is around 90 to 120. If somebody is running, most average Americans run at a pace of 6 miles per hour or around a 10-minute mile. If you have a step rate of 180 steps at that slower speed, extremely inefficient. Where we got into trouble is years ago, there was a research study that does show increasing your step rate, your cadence, made a reduction in loading. But it wasn't the actual step rate itself, it was what that changed. By someone trying to increase their step rate, they spent less time going up in the air. They stayed closer to the ground so they can clock more steps. And their foot, their leg, spent less time going out in front of them because it wanted to make contact with the ground and increase the step rate. But people in these studies did report that there was a greater amount of exertion. It was more tiring. Yeah, they're taking more steps, but the benefit is that it changed the mechanics. We can change the mechanics without manipulating the step rate or the frequency of steps. So having a higher cadence is not a sign of improvement, a sign of performance. It's just matched and should be matched to your speed. Back to the canoe analogy. If I'm going slow and I'm just quickly not producing a lot of power so I can quickly turn it over and just taking so many strokes, I can wear myself out. The key is, how can I get there with the frequency that maximizes the pushback, the force, and minimizes the time up in the air and minimizes the time slowing. But we'll see what he has to say about the cadence.
Since it costs more energy to move things fast compared to slow, maybe I had a higher cadence when I had my feet close to the ground, and that's why it costs more energy. I actually didn't think about my cadence at all when I did the tests, but it turns out that I had a little higher cadence in one of the tests. But if we look at the cadence, we can see that I had a slightly higher cadence when the feet came up higher.
Here's the thing, the speed stayed the same. So if you go 1 mile at a constant speed, and if you can get there in less steps, that's the goal. Getting there and it taking more steps to get there, keeping the speed constant and the same, it's not efficient. So of course he's working harder, he's picking his feet up more, he's more active with it, he's having a higher step rate, but we don't need all that. We don't need that high of a step rate at that speed of an 8:02 pace.
So I moved my legs both faster and in a bigger movement than when I relaxed my knees.
So again, this is confusing. Relax the knees isn't accurate. If he did relax the knees, the knee flexors and extenders, the quads and the hamstrings, the feet would actually be closer to the ground. By relaxing the knee, the leg would go down towards the ground, not pull it up. So that's where it's extremely confusing when he says relax the knee and it goes up. Nothing goes up when you relax the knee. It goes down towards the earth with gravity.
But the cost of moving my body parts was significantly lower. It may sound so logical and like common sense to save energy by keeping your feet close to the ground. But when you measure the cost of energy and know a bit about the law of physics, it's quite easy to see that this is not the case. The reason many recreational runners have their feet too close to the ground is usually because they use their thigh muscles to prevent the movement.
So this is no. The reason why recreational runners have their feet closer to the ground is because they're running at a slower speed. Ideally, when we walk, when we go faster, there becomes a point where it's more efficient to leave the ground, but to move further horizontal distance between each steps. The faster that I go, the distance between each step starts to increase. But what you'll also see is passively, this is where it is passive. The faster that we go, we push the leg further back behind us. And as a result, when the leg comes forward, it's closer to the knee. It's exactly what he's talking about, but that's at faster speeds. Most people aren't running at these fast speeds. Look at the difference of how high my foot goes when I'm running at a slower pace versus faster. And here's the thing, I'm not changing anything. I'm still doing the same exact thing. I'm still pushing the ground back. The only thing that changes is I'm pushing back with more force, further back, and at a higher frequency, the 3 Fs. I'm not changing my mechanics. I'm not suddenly picking the foot up or relaxing the knee and having the foot go up. It's a passive thing that happens. Most recreational runners are not running at these speeds where you're going to see a lot of the foot coming up higher. And here's the thing, if someone is running at a slower speed and you see their feet coming way up and their ankles coming way up, that's a sign to me that they're doing more work than they need to. They probably are picking the feet up and wasting energy. We should see a clear progression of running slower, and incrementally as they go faster and faster, the foot starts to come up a little bit higher in correlation with the 3 Fs.
Some runners, because they think that having their feet close to the ground costs less energy, and some are just bad at relaxing. And then they put energy into resisting the movement, which leads to costing more energy to move the foot and the leg forward. Again, they spend energy to get a movement that costs even more energy. It's like paying a monthly fee to a club to get a higher rent.
I don't understand that. But let's go to my analogy of using payments and principles and mortgage rates and all that stuff. So again, when we're spending, energy expenditure is like a form of payment, like money. If we're trying to move forward, our goal is moving forward, that's the principle. If we're trying to pay off a house, that's the principle. When we're expending energy or spending money, we want as much as that as possible to go towards the goal of paying on the principle. I want all the muscles in my body that can help and to assist in me moving forward to be used, and not using unnecessary muscles that don't go towards that goal of moving forward, paying on the principle. We don't want to spend money on the interest. If someone is picking their feet way up higher off the ground, that's a form of paying on the interest. It's not necessary, and over time, it's just going to cost us more, and we're not going to get the results by paying on the principle would.
As opposed to not paying a monthly fee and get lower rent. At least as long as you get the movement through relaxation, and partly on how you move your hip and your core, and you don't actually lift your feet with muscle force. There's a big difference between to do a movement, to force it, and to letting the movement happen.
Again, yes, what he's saying there is accurate, but how he's actually applying it is not. We do want it to be passive. We do want the foot to come up passively, but that does not occur by relaxing the knees. It doesn't happen. What we do want, again, is pushing the ground further back, and naturally, passively, the leg will come up. Check out this post that I did a long time ago that helps to better demonstrate and conceptualize this. Please stop trying to kick your butt. Let's go back to our analogy of the canoe. How we move forward is we push back. We want to move faster forward, we push back further. Watch what happens. As I bring the oar forward, I don't need to bring it all the way up out of the water, but since I pushed further back, naturally the oar is going to come up a little bit higher. Let's correlate this with running. At 7 miles per hour, that's how far my leg goes back. At 12 miles per hour, it goes back further. As I bring it forward, that's how high my heel comes up at 7 versus 12 miles an hour. Look how much higher it is. I didn't change the mechanics. I'm not trying to kick my butt when I go faster, but it will happen on its own. What we don't want is at 7 miles per hour and at lower speeds, you trying to consciously kick your butt.
Just like you learn in my online course.
Of course, classic.
And of course, I would like to add that exactly how high the foot and the knees should be depends very much on how fast you run. The faster the pace, the bigger the movement.
Ding, 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 that's it. It's highly dependent on speed. And he's running at a speed that's 8.02 miles per hour, where he's having way too much movement, more movement than he needs. So yes, the little disclaimer, the little nuance, it's highly dependent on speed. Yes, absolutely. And that's where I'm trying to see, can we run, not sacrifice your speed, keep the same speed, but with less overall movement? And what does that mean? Get rid of the interest, pay more on the principle. We shouldn't see these big excursions of our limbs and our body parts at these slower speeds.
And as always, you do what you want. If you like to have your feet close to the ground when you run, I think you should have your feet close to the ground when you run. I don't care.
So I think this is the only thing that we agree on, 100%. I am not here to preach. I'm not here to tell you what to do. My job is to teach, supply you with the information. If you're happy and healthy, I'm happy. That's it. If you choose to pick your feet up, if you choose not to, as long as you are happy and healthy, I really don't care. My passion is just, if you choose to run, I want to help you to do it smarter, safer, and faster. And there's a reason why the injury rate is so incredibly high. I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to help the world run safer. But if you're happy and healthy, I'm happy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it educational, helpful, informative. Please let me know your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your concerns, and how I can do better. Thanks for being here.